A few people have written me questions which I'll go through, but I don't really know whether I'll stay with the questions or take off and talk. I just never know. So be warned. Somebody asks, I think I heard Master say on one of SRF's audio tapes that we should satisfy all our desires so that we can then focus all desire on God. Question: how should we balance our worldly desires with our desire for God? Well, let me try to explain what this is all about. What is the matter with desires? They're bonds. Every time, let's just look at it this way. Here you are walking down a sunny street, and the birds are singing, and everything is beautiful, and your heart is happy as can be, and you happen to pass a shop window in which you see a beautiful dress, or a beautiful suit, or a beautiful car, or a beautiful camera, whatever it might be. And the thought suddenly enters your mind, gee, that would be nice to own, wouldn't it? The sun is still singing, the birds are still singing. Somehow you're not quite that contented, because there's suddenly the thought in your mind that yes, I'm very happy, sure, but I would be more happy if I got that desire fulfilled. And so you go home and you think, well, I'm still happy, I don't need that thing. Before you know it, this is sort of eating into your heart, and you think, I just gotta get that camera or that car or whatever. And so you think, how can I get it? And this desire becomes perhaps even an obsession. And you start thinking that I've got to have that camera or that car. And so you perhaps even go so far as to take a second job so you can get this thing. But finally, you've got it. And you feel so good. Why? It's sort of like a pinch, like this. You pinch your skin, and if you pinch long enough and hard enough and finally let go, you think, oh, that feels so good. Well, it felt good before you pinched it, didn't it? And you felt good before you had that pinch of desire. Desire is bondage in the sense that it makes you think you need something to be happy. And the truth is, you don't really need anything at all. There was a beautiful story about an Italian sculptor and silversmith, Benvenuto Cellini. Many of you know his name. And he did a lot of work ordered by the Pope. And he was a great artist. His work is still admired and loved. But the Pope, while admiring it and loving it, was not ready to pay him. And Benvenuto Cellini realized, as all of us do sooner or later, that it takes money to eat. And he wasn't eating. So he told the Pope, I'm sorry, but I cannot do any more until you pay me. Well, the Pope was in the driver's seat, and so he put him in a dungeon. And so Cellini was living in this dungeon with just enough light to read by 1 hour a day. A damp mattress, soggy mattress, rats running all around the floor, sumptuous meals, a crust of bread and a glass of water every day. And all he could do during that 1 hour a day was read the Bible. And the rest of the time, he prayed. Nothing else to do. But you know, so many people think that if I do this or that, everything will go right. The truth is that what we need to do is open ourselves to the infinite consciousness, and then God can fill us. And that's what happened to him. That having nothing else to do, he prayed to God. Well, not the best of motives, but still he did it. And he began to feel so much joy that finally, when the Pope gave up and let him out, he was so filled with joy that he wrote a poem, and he said, if you want to know what real joy is, arrange to be thrown into a dungeon and have a damp mattress and rats everywhere, and only enough light to read by 1 hour a day and pray the rest of the time. He said he had never known such joy as he experienced then. Happiness does not come from things, it comes from inside. And anytime you feel that you've got something, some cause to be happy, it's always because it satisfies some little thought or desire in your own mind. Otherwise, it's perfectly right to say that one man's meat is another man's poison. Things that will delight some people will madden others. It isn't things that make anybody happy. It's their own ideas about those things. And so it is that when people develop a little bit of knowledge, wisdom, savoir-faire, they realize that the less attached I am, the more happy I am. I remember when I transferred from Haverford College to Brown University. And all people entering Brown had to go through the campus psychiatrist. And so he was asking me different questions, and we had a nice rapport. Then he said, well, I'd like to ask you a question. You've got a library of books that you love. I did, yes. All sorts of classics and so on. He said, well, let me ask you this question. Supposing you came home one day and found that somebody had stolen all your books, how would you feel? I said, fine, it wouldn't matter to me. He said, that's the first thing you've said that's disappointed me. And I said, I thought that's the first thing you've said that's disappointed me. Because he didn't understand. Why should my happiness be conditioned by a bunch of books? Why should it be conditioned by anything? The less you have sometimes, the happier you are. But I'm not saying go out and sell everything. This isn't the age for that. But I am saying don't be so attached to things. Understand that no matter what the circumstances, you can be happy. Now, when this person says he heard this from a tape of Masters, that we should satisfy all of our desires, that's quite a misunderstanding. And you know why, basically? Because every desire satisfied almost invariably leads to 10 others. It's like that hydra-headed monster that every time Hercules would cut off one head, another 10 would sprout out, or however many, I don't remember now. But the truth is that when you satisfy desires, it sets a ball in motion in your mind, thinking, oh, well then, I feel good with this satisfied desire, let me have more desires. And so you go on and on. You never satisfy desires in that way. However, there is a little bit of something to be understood here. And that is that if they aren't gripping desires, then why not go ahead and satisfy it? In other words, it's not that important. If you have a desire for an ice cream, well, go ahead and satisfy it if you want to. It doesn't mean you have to satisfy if it becomes an obsession and you have to tramp across Sahara deserts to get to that ice cream parlor, but if you can do it easily, then fine. But that's not so much a desire that leads to others, whereas desire for money, you know, they've asked people in different income brackets whether they were satisfied with the income that they were receiving. People all the way from 5,000 to 100,000, 200,000, are you satisfied? In virtually every case, people replied, yes, they would be satisfied if they had 10% more. That 10% more represents infinity. There's no end to it. One man had this desire for $1 million. This is years ago when $1 million meant a great deal more than it does now. And he finally got his million, and Yogananda said, well, now are you satisfied? He said, no, I'll be satisfied when my cousin is making 40 million. I won't be satisfied till I make 50 million. It goes on and on. Certain basic desires become gripping, and they become like an infestation. They become a disease. You can't let go of them. That kind of desire, it's very important to release, to not hold that desire. Try to give it to God, because going into that particular thing is like getting on a treadmill. There's no end to it. So work on those desires. The truth is that all desires will have to be fulfilled, but in a different way. You see, when you find God. All right, I'll give you a story. When I met Yogananda, I asked him to help me overcome a fondness for good food. He said, don't worry about those little things. When ecstasy comes, everything goes. And that's the thing, that certain things, I remember he was talking about just this point here one time, and he said every desire has to be fulfilled before you can attain liberation. The issue is how to fulfill them. Well, one part of that issue is when you have God, they're fulfilled automatically. The other part is that certain desires keep you from ever finding God, because you're just wandering down a trail like a bloodhound looking for this, that, and the other thing. And so I asked him one time, you mean, sir, that if I had a desire once for an ice cream cone, that has to be fulfilled? He said, oh yes. Well, that's kind of scary. But it's not so scary when you realize that once you're really in divine joy, nothing matters very much. You just begin to see that it's sort of like he gave this comparison. He said that if you like stale cheese, and somebody comes to you and says, I have some wonderful new cheese here, try it. And you compare the two. You say, oh, I don't like that stale cheese anymore because this is so much better. So you don't like the things of this world because what you've got in God is so much better. And these things don't prevent you that much from finding God. That's the issue. Some things do. And those that are very deep-seated and strong desires, work on them as you can, but then what do you do about them if they're really strong and you don't know what you can do about them? Well, as Yogananda said, a saint is a sinner who never gave up. And you've got to just constantly try. Don't identify yourself with your weaknesses, with your flaws, with your desires, your attachments. Don't say, that's me. Say that, well, I watch this, but I don't engage in it with my heart. I'm not a part of this. Try bit by bit to detach yourself. And there's another thing that you can do. Because you can't fight all these battles at once. So take on those things that you know you can fight. And then bit by bit you'll develop the strength in the process to take on more difficult battles, until finally you'll be able to stand up to everything and say, it doesn't matter anymore. Like Buddha, who went through all these things, and finally, at the end, when he was just ready for enlightenment, Satan appeared to him, Mara, the illusion, the delusion of Maya, and appeared in the form of money and beautiful women and all sorts of things. And he just looked at it calmly and wasn't touched. And then he knocked his knuckles on the ground 3 times. He said, Mara, I have conquered you. And suddenly that all disappeared. Well, that day will come to you. It has to. But in the meantime, you've got to do what it takes to pull your feet out of that thick mud. So it's not so easy. But you can, bit by bit, take on the struggles that are... Excuse me, would you get me that glass there, please? Thank you. See. Thank you. Take on the struggles you can handle, and always try to tell yourself, in fact, this is a good practice. Every night, mentally build yourself a bonfire and feel that that bonfire is your heart burning up all its attachments, all its desires, and then mentally take everything to which you feel attached, everything, known, unknown, doesn't matter, just feed that fire with that and feel that it's burning itself out. Every night, say, God, I give it all back to you. It won't happen quickly. And if you're cynical enough, you'll say, who's kidding who? But in time, you'll find that, yes, you begin to feel a joy welling up inside you, and you'll begin to look at the things that have held your attachment and attraction, and you'll say, really isn't that interesting? And so you'll see that those things which seem to identify you as you are right now won't be you anymore. You will know that you are free. But this comes by constant, regular effort and by remembering a saint is a sinner who never gave up. Remember too, and this is one of the things that people have a struggle about, especially here in our modern American civilization. God knows I had it when I was a young man. I was very independent, and I didn't really see, I couldn't see anybody I could follow. I just felt, who are they to tell me anything? But then I did reach the point where trying to work on myself, trying to improve myself, I gradually realized that I wasn't getting anywhere. I'd put one foot forward and slide back with the other foot. And I began to realize I really needed help. But I looked around me and I thought, who's going to help me? They don't have any wisdom. They're like that psychiatrist, being disappointed for the wrong reason. They had all sorts of silly ideas as to truth. I couldn't respect their wisdom. That's the truth of it. Then, this was 1948, I read Autobiography of a Yogi, and it completely changed my life. And I thought, here, finally, is someone whom I can trust, someone whom I know to be wise. I took the next bus from New York to Los Angeles, 4 days and 4 nights. And I went to him, and the first words I said to him were, I want to be your disciple. Unthinkable for me even a month before, but I meant it, because I knew here was someone who could help me. Now, I remember that he said to me, because I was intellectual, I had done a lot of reading and a lot of thinking, and had the delusion that I could arrive at truth by deep thought, and I was so fed up with myself because I saw I wasn't getting any truth at all. And that's why I came to him. And I remembered my childhood and how innocent and happy I had been, and I thought, I've lost that. How can I get it back? And he kept telling me, work on developing devotion. And I did. And I remember I began to think, well, it was funny, you know how the mind can play tricks? This is again why you really need the help of someone. I was working on developing humility. One day I woke up and realized I was becoming proud of my humility. You can't win for losing. But there is somebody who can help you, and that is someone sent to you by God, a guru. A guru is not some financial wizard. Those are how they've debased these terms. A guru is not some sort of dictator who's telling you what to do, not at all. But a guru is a man of wisdom who's taken that journey before you and can say, watch out, there's a pitfall there. And if you listen to him, you'll go around. And if you don't, you'll fall into the hole. And sure, you'll crawl out of it eventually. You've got eternity to get there. But my feeling is eternity is quite long enough. And so what I found was that by tuning in to him, bit by bit, I began to feel those things that I was trying to develop, which maybe I'd tried and hadn't succeeded. But I remember I felt so much devotion and so much sweetness. And one time he was with a group of the monks in Encinitas. He used to call me Walter. And he said to them, look how I have changed, Walter. And I thought, yes, that's true. That's what happened. By attuning myself with him, I was able to draw his power. That's why it says in the Bible, to all those who received him, to them gave he the power to become the sons of God. You receive that power. You can't create it. It's just too difficult. There's too much confusion in the mind to get out of it. But I have found, and it's becoming more and more clear after all I've been doing these things 53 years, and relative to eternity, that's not much. But nonetheless, relative to a human life, it's a fair amount. And I find more and more that things just come easily to me. I ask a question, I know the answer. I seek a solution to a problem, there it is. I find more and more through that attunement that I just know. It's something that I can say from very definite experience. An experience of somebody who thought he wanted the answers for himself and never found them. The experience of somebody who tried to attune to a man of wisdom that he really did believe in, and through that attunement found that what he himself was seeking was coming to him. And I don't know how it happens, but I have seen it happen again and again. Disciples of great gurus, I'm not the first in history, I'm the last of a line of millions of people who have tried this. But one thing you'll find, that in all walks of life, writing, money-making, pleasure-seeking, whatever it might be, you won't find a single person who says that this is the goal of life. Or you may find one who says so, but there's a lot of disagreement in his own field. There's only one field in which there's absolute agreement, and that is, you have never heard of somebody who found God and says, forget it, it's a bummer. Not one. They all say, this is the goal of life. They all know it so deeply that they're willing to give their lives to help other people to find that goal. There can't be more love than that, as Jesus put it. Greater love hath no man than to give up his life for his friends, to give up his life for others that they too may experience this joy. Well, that's what the great saints in all religions, I'm not talking Hinduism, Christianity, Buddhism, no. I'm talking the goal of all souls, which is to know who they really are in relation to the infinite. Every one of us has that deeply planted within himself. And those who have had right training are altogether the opposite of what Saint Teresa of Avila said, when she said that people have no idea of the damage caused by priests who are not, I don't know if she used the word enlightened, but priests who give counsel without understanding the deep spiritual teachings. They tried to keep me, she said, from praying in silence and meditating and going into the stillness. They tried to keep me from that for years, and it was just constantly a stumbling block for me until finally I understood and I realized that I had to be instructed by God. And she went into the silence. That is what religion is all about. Don't follow just people who call themselves teachers, but follow people with whom your heart really resonates, people who you feel have gained what you want. And that's what Yogananda was. And I never found him in all the time that I knew him, and I never found him fall from that ideal. Well, the teaching of a guru is much more than his example, his words. It's something, well, okay, I told you this last night, it's worth repeating. I was sitting with him, with a group of monks, and he was telling them to fill in some potholes in the driveway. I wasn't involved in that work. I was doing office work at the time, so I just sat there and closed my eyes. And I felt so much joy coming over me, because that was what he was really emanating. It wasn't words, it was that joy. But that joy becomes your guide. You see, if you do something and it increases that joy, then you know this is right. But if you do something and it takes that joy, diminishes that joy, or takes it away, you know you've done something wrong. So in this way, he leads you. In this way, you begin to feel that, no, he's telling me not to do it because I feel a certain disharmony. I remember many years ago, I wanted to write something to somebody, and it was a scolding thing, and I still feel it was good advice. But as I started to write it, I began to feel a nervousness. And I realized I shouldn't write it. You know, you can say the truth to somebody if they're not ready to hear it, but you shouldn't say it. Don't dump your ideas on people. They have to invite it. They have to be ready for it. Otherwise, respect their ignorance even. Respect them as fellow souls who have their moments when they can grow, their times when they can receive, and other times when they cannot. And I felt, no, I shouldn't. So I didn't write that letter. I didn't send it. I tore it up. I felt a sense of relief inside. And in this way you will see that God will guide you, and then more specifically, God will draw you to somebody who will help to lift that burden from you, help to give you the power to understand and to know. Well, desires can't really be overcome just by ourselves. It's too complicated a knot. But they can be overcome by this infusion of joy and love. And bit by bit you begin to realize, well, that's what it's all about. And then these things begin to mean less and less until finally they just sort of drop away. Well, that's what Master meant when he said that all desires have to be fulfilled. Yes, they do. But you don't have to fulfill them. And you'll never fulfill them if you try. There are just too many of them. I mean billions and billions and billions. I don't mean the desires only of this incarnation. I mean all kinds of desires. They're buried in your subconscious. And why you can't get certain things done is because your mind won't let go. They're sort of blocking your freedom inwardly. Why can't you sit down and go into ecstasy? Karma, that's all. And all these desires holding you down, like Gulliver, when he landed on the beach and they saw this huge giant. They had no way of tying him with their ropes. So they got lots of their ropes, which were to him like threads, but they tied him up while he was still asleep. And when he woke up, he couldn't move. Enough desires can hold you down. So don't worry about little things, but always work on inwardly becoming free, and always give everything to God, and never identify yourself with anything that you've done. I mean, I've done a few things in my life. I've not wasted my time. I've written music and books and started communities and God knows what else. I don't identify myself with any of it. When I say I'm not the doer, I really mean it. One time, after a service in Hollywood Church many years ago, somebody complimented me on a talk, and I said, God is the doer. Really? I said, well, I knew it was good. I didn't know it was that good. No, that's not what I mean. I mean, every time you breathe, it's God's power that breathes through you. Every time you walk, it's His energy that walks through you. In that sense, give Him the credit for everything. And if you've done something wrong, give Him the blame and say, it's your problem, Lord. Yogananda used to say he likes that. God likes us not to be identified personally with things. And the more we understand this and live in this way, the more we begin to see that the shackles of freedom are being cut one by one. The shackles that keep us from freedom, that keep us in bondage. And we see ourselves finally no longer identified with that old fellow. It no longer matters to us. Whether we've done well, whether we've done badly, it's all His show. So to get rid of desire, meditate, yes. Give everything to God, yes. Feel that He's the doer, yes. The way to freedom in the Bhagavad Gita is to give up desire for the fruits of your action. It doesn't mean don't act. You wouldn't get anywhere not acting, and nor would you able not to act, because even if you decide you're not going to act, you're still going to breathe, that's action. You're going to think, that's action. Well, am I doing that noise myself? Oops, sorry. That's action. And so what you need is to give up desire for the fruits of your action. Do your best. God won't come to people who work haphazardly. You have to put all your effort out to do well whatever you do. Do it for God. Don't accept to yourself any of the benefits from your action, that's the way to freedom. Did you write your music with the... just a minute. Sorry about that, Dave. Did you write your music with the vibrations of the chakra system in mind? You know, it's very interesting. I studied voice, as you know, years ago. And I learned the techniques of singing in classical style. But I've added to that when I learned of the chakras in the system of yoga. And I discovered that you can actually sing from the different chakras. For example, if I sing with just a chest tone, which is what they teach you in music, to sort of fill a concert hall, ma, that's a chest tone. But ma, that's from the heart chakra. It's very different, isn't it? Ma, you can feel it. Try it yourselves and you'll see. This is what I've learned to do, is sing from the heart chakra. But then not to sing outward only, but upward. Direct that sound, that vibration, upward to the point between the eyebrows. And the next chakra is the throat chakra. And this one, if you can get in tune with that, it's harder, but if you can, you'll find an expansion of peace. You know, it was very interesting to me. Years ago I was making a recording and I was singing an Indian mantra. Sri Ram, Jai Ram, Jai Jai Ram Om. Sri Ram, Jai Ram, Jai Jai Ram Om. And it was fine, sounding fine. And suddenly, toward the end of it, I felt my energy going into the throat chakra. It was suddenly a change. And I told the recording engineer, okay, let's do it again. He said, what do you mean? That was perfect. I said, no, let's do it again. And I was singing from this chakra as well as the heart chakra. And there was really a vibration of calmness, of expansion. And sort of as a corroboration for this, a student of mine, her son was 2 years old. And she scolded him once, angrily apparently. He loved this particular recording. And when she was scolding him with anger, he looked up at her pathetically, and he said, Sri Ram Jai Ram. But your chakras are a part of it, it's true. And in writing music, I have done primarily this. I have put my mind in the upper chakras and directed my energy upward. And that's when the music comes. It isn't so much I'm thinking chakras as I'm thinking energy moving upward. And naturally it's in the heart. Naturally it's in the different upper chakras. Naturally it's flowing upward from the lower chakras. And it doesn't mean, this is an interesting point that students of yoga sometimes mistake. They think that because spiritual consciousness is centered in the upper part of the body, which you can see if you've never been exposed to this teaching at all, you can see that it's universally true that when people are happy, they automatically look up, they smile, there's an upward rising, and so they even use words like, I feel uplifted, I feel high, and when they feel the opposite, they feel downcast, they feel in the dumps, they feel low. The very words we use indicate that we know these are truths. We may not have made them dynamic to our consciousness yet, but we know it's so. And so, this is the higher consciousness. When your energy can be from here up, from the heart up, then yes, you do feel greatly uplifted. And when it's in the lower chakras, it has a low quality to it too. You feel unhappy. Happiness it has to be related to an upward move of the energy, and unhappiness to a downward move. And so In yoga, many people think, well, I shouldn't even think of the lower chakras, but in fact you should, because they have to be stimulated, but directed upward rather than outward. This is an important point. I know one time Dr. Lewis, who was Yogananda's first Kriya Yoga disciple in America, and Yogananda used to love to play the tablas, the Indian drums. And Dr. Lewis just didn't like this. He was very Bostonian and very, well, not drummy. And Master said to him, get into it, doctor. It'll help to free the karma from the spine. That's an interesting one, isn't it? By those rhythms and so on, I don't mean rock music, which sort of drives them down, but intricate rhythms such as you find in Indian singing, Indian music, that helps to release it. It helps to sing Om in all the chakras, at each one of them, but always directing that chakra upward. For instance, if you concentrate in the navel, keep the mind here. Chant Om mentally in the navel chakra, in the spine opposite the navel, but look at this point, and you'll find that that helps to raise your energy. All of these chakras are good, but the direction of energy should be upward. So in music, you need rhythm. That's more in the lower chakras. And you need it, though. Without it, you've got something that's sort of pea soup or something. You need something that is stimulating. Then, however, you'll see that certain harmonies, certain melodies to me are the most important part of music, because they speak of the aspiration of the heart. When you know what you want, you automatically think in terms of melodies. Why did the 20th century produce so little melodies, so few melodies? Because they didn't know what they wanted. There was no aspiration. There was no belief in anything. There was altogether too much atheism and skepticism and cynicism. Melody won't come out of that. But you'll notice how in popular music, there were some beautiful melodies. Why? Because everybody can relate to things like human love. Everybody can relate to ordinary human emotions. And so some of the most beautiful melodies were popular melodies. Night and day, you are the one. It's such a lovely melody. Yet the sentiments expressed in the words are just mundane. Yet if you listen to it, it just really melts your heart. Moon River, so many others, they're just thrilling. But why? Because the people who wrote them knew what they were talking about. The people who have written classical music didn't know what they were doing anymore. They didn't have any aspiration. When you know what you want, this is what I found. For example, I wanted to write a piece of music for Pompeii. I had a lot of slides I'd taken of that part of Italy, and I wanted to do a slideshow with music. So I thought, well, what is Pompeii? Well, it was destroyed in a tragedy, yes, the eruption of Vesuvius. But after all, 2,000 years ago, it's not that great a tragedy today. Any effort to make it one would be a little false. So tragedy, but seen sort of as at a distance, a recollection of tragedy. Sin, yes, I suppose they must have gotten some bad karma for their whole city to be wiped out. But after all, over 2,000 years, one hopes that they've learned their lessons and they're not that plunged in darkness and self-accusation and blame and guilt. Not that serious. Tourism, yes, there would be a certain interest. And so a certain sadness, but perhaps a sadness that has expiated itself, its sin, and is more happy too. So a sadness, but happiness within the sadness. I had 4 or 5 specific thoughts before I even asked for a melody. Then I took these as if in a basket, and I say, oh God, okay God, give me a melody that says all that. It came like that. No effort at all, and it was just the right melody. But that's happened again and again. When I know what I want, when I ask for it with clarity, then I get it. So the same thing is with this. In writing music, be clear. And I'm not expecting many of you to think of writing music, but I do expect you to do a lot of other things. And you can be creative in any field. You can be creative sewing, cooking, working at your desk in the office, answering people's questions, knowing what to do. Even I'll tell you a funny thing that happened to me. And it isn't as if everything goes right, far from it. But somehow it always seems to go right in the end. Anyway, this went right in the beginning, so that's the kind I like to tell. I was on the freeway, the Skyline Drive down southward from San Francisco, and I was going along merrily, and suddenly I heard this tuk, 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 and the motor died. I'd run out of gas. I hadn't looked at my gas gauge. And so I thought, well, Divine Mother, it's okay, you take care. And sure enough, I was coasting. I would be coming to a stop, but I saw an exit. So I took the exit, and it turned out to go downhill, and I coasted for about 2 miles. And there was a gas station on the left, and I turned left, and just at the gas station, I stopped. Well, this is the sort of thing that happens to you the more you really think of God and let Him take charge of your life. And I don't say that He's going to clear the brambles from before you. He'll often throw quite a few in your way. But it's always for a purpose. It's always to teach you something. It always gives you strength. I remember when I was building Ananda, I didn't have wealthy people to fund me. I didn't have anybody to fund me. So I had to earn it myself. And that meant giving yoga classes in a different city every night. And I reached the point where I must say I began to sort of resent what Divine Mother was doing to me, because money has never meant anything to me. I know when I was in college, I used to sit at a separate table from the business majors. I didn't want to think about such things. My dad, when I was 16, said he wanted to buy me a tuxedo, and I said, Dad, don't bother. I'll never earn enough money to need a tuxedo. And it's been true. Not long after that, I went to Yogananda, became a monk, and I've lived that way all my life. But here I had to really think in terms of earning something like $50,000 or more a year. And that was a lot more money then than it is now. But Divine Mother sent me the students I needed, and yes, I always managed to come through. There was one time when somebody tried to foreclose on me, and he said, unless you pay within 2 weeks, I'm going to foreclose. And I just didn't know anything. I'd been living in a monastery. He'd placed a lien on the property. I didn't know what a lien was. I didn't know what foreclose meant, but I did know something drastic would happen. I'd better get busy. Well, all I could do was what I was doing. I couldn't think of anything more. My ability to pay these debts was dependent on how many students enrolled in my classes. And I absolutely stuck to my principle. If somebody came and couldn't pay, I said, okay, come. I would not, for the sake of money, hold back. I never made that my priority. But I did sort of feel unhappy with Divine Mother. In fact, let's face it, I resented her. I scolded her. I said, why are you doing this to me? But you know, in the end, yes, I did earn the money needed. That month when this man tried to foreclose, I didn't know where to turn. But I was giving a slideshow of slides I'd taken in India. And afterwards, this was in a private home, and I didn't want to talk about this problem that I was facing. It didn't seem the right moment, so I just showed the slides, and I was just leaving. But mind you, this is the trick. Put it in God's hands. And so I put it in God's hands, and I was walking out to my car, and some young man followed me. He said, well, I like what you're doing. Would you accept donations? I said, sure. I thought he'd probably give me $5, $10. On the hood of the car, he wrote a check for $3,000. I phoned this man and I said, listen, I've got the money to pay you, but I'm not going to do it. I'll let you incur all the legal fees you can. At the last moment, I'll come in. Now, you may say that was not the right attitude. No, I had it. I have to confess. And at any rate, he said, oh, well, in that case, give me it now and I'll give you a big discount. So he tried to dig a ditch for me and fell into it himself. But the thing is that I did finally, every moment. That month, my bank account at the end of paying all these things off was $1.37. But I always met my debts. And I realized at the end of it that yes, I had earned the money I needed to pay off the debts, put up the buildings, get the community started, but my real gain was inner strength. Doing what I had to do even though I hated it, doing it nonetheless, and doing it for God. And it gave me a strength that I've never regretted that experience because of what I gained spiritually from it. So God will put brambles in your way, yes, He will. He will make it difficult for you, and the more sincere you are, unfortunately perhaps, the more the tests. But not unfortunately really, because He sees that you're serious and that He wants you to help clean up this whole mess of past karma and get out more quickly. So really it is a great blessing. Nonetheless, whatever you do it with the right spirit, do it with clarity. Chanting in the chakras is surely a way of attaining clarity, because your muddiness comes when you're at your periphery. Clarity comes when you're at your own center. The more you can feel from within, here's a secret of mine. I don't know if I can explain it. I'll use the words. You have to try to understand, and if you don't, there's nothing I can do about it. But here's what I try to do when I, for instance, write a piece of music, try to find the answer to a problem, try to help somebody, whatever it might be. I try to get to my own center. That means in the chakras, in the point between the eyebrows, in the heart, get to my own center. And then from this center, intuit the center of whatever it is I'm trying to do. Now, how do you do that? I cannot tell you. I don't know. I just know I do it. But I can do it more easily with people. I can explain it more easily with people. I tune into my inner self, then I try to tune into their self. So it isn't a matter of my saying what I've learned from my experience. It's rather my trying to feel what their own soul is trying to say to them. And the more in tune I am with my center, the more I can understand their center. And the more in tune I am with their center, the more I feel. And that's how often it has happened that people say, well, that's what I was thinking. I just didn't quite have it clear enough. I helped them to make it clear. That's all I did. And there's also that when you tune in to them like this, you find, well, I'll tell you another strange thing that's happened to me many times in life. People ask me a question, and I say, I don't know. Because I'm perfectly frank, I don't have any pretensions. If I don't know, I'll say so. But here's the odd thing, as soon as I say I don't know, I do know. Why? Because I'm relaxed, I'm not straining. I'm not trying to reach out to understand, I just, okay. And then it's there. The more relaxed you are about these things, the more that understanding will come. And that's true for anything. I've written a lot of music, so that's a field with which I'm more familiar. But I get to myself, I get to my center, and then I don't try. I've heard that composers can spend months sweating over some song. I don't try at all. I just I offer it up to God and try to feel the center of what it is that I'm trying to reach. The musical expression of a particular thought that I'm trying to give expression to. And I find that when I strain for it, it won't come, but if I just relax, it's there. You don't have to work in that way. What you have to do is work on yourself to get rid of the resistance in you. But you don't have to strain for these things. Get rid of your resistance, get rid of your ego, get rid of your pride, get rid of your thought that, oh, this is going to wow people. None of that. Just think this song is needed to say this. What will do it? And just with relaxation, open yourself to it. And I don't know. I mean, maybe you can't do it. I don't know. But I can tell you that I do it. And it's very simple. That thing from which the song of Pompeii came, that was one of, I think, 9 songs that came to me all within an hour. And each one was completely different. For instance, the one right after Pompeii, and the melody hasn't come to me right now. After that came a happy tarantella of Napoli. La 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 la. It's a sort of like a Napolitana Neapolitan dance. And right after that came Cloisters, which we sang last night. Right after that, it was all in sequence, but this is how the slideshow was set up. So I said, okay, now I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this. You don't have to get in the mood. In fact, I find that I'm not touched emotionally by any of the music I've written. None of it has come from some deep suffering and trauma, no. I've written sad songs when I was happiest. I've written happy songs when I was going through the hardest trials. You don't have to think of it on an emotional level, but bring it to a feeling level, an intuitive level. And you'll find that then you just know what to do. Go from your center to the center of what it is you're trying to do. Now, how do you do that? You've got to relax into that center. You can't strain out and grab it with your fist. You have to, from this point, just sort of relax and feel. Because you know, as John Donne said, no man is an island. Where there are plenty of islands. But what happens with islands? You go deep enough and you find they're all united by the world, by the earth. And so we are all united, not outwardly. One person's male, another's female, one person's white, another's black, another one is many different qualities and talents and so on. Underneath that, if you get deep enough to your center, you will find, oh, that's where it all comes from. In meditation, you come to the point where you just don't even know what's up or down. And you feel united to a kind of consciousness that is everywhere and in everyone. That's what I mean by trying to center yourself to the point where you feel that center in others. Now, I know I've told you a very important truth. I don't know that you've understood it. I know that it took me years to understand it. These things are intuitive, they're subtle, you can't get them. But if you remember the words, and maybe you've understood it, but if not, don't forget those words, because bit by bit, you'll deepen in your own understanding to the point where you'll see that, yes, you know how to do these things because they're there already to be found. I just feel that these melodies are blessing me by coming to me. They're not mine. But they're a part of that particular state of consciousness which relates to a chakra, probably, but which relates to the divine center of everything. Now, I didn't plan to talk longer than this, and mind you, I've got a lot of questions here. I'm not going to answer them, forgive me. But I hope that this will give you a little glimpse of certain things that I do feel from my poor experience, and I call it that with false modesty because in fact I'm thrilled with that experience, but I don't call it that with false modesty in the sense that I think it's anything compared to anyone else. There have been people who have understood so much more. But the little bit that I have experienced, I want to share. I'm happy to share, and I hope that to some extent what I've said will be of help to you in your spiritual search. Thank you. God bless you.